Oops.
Okay.
No, okay, recording. So when we talk about the principle, so here what we are referring to basically is 10 principles of life. So when we talk about a principle, because the principle is, it's like that is how it works. A gravity is a principle. Can we go against the principle? Of course, we can go against the principle. The rockets are flying, to escape the gravity. But it requires an enormous effort to go against the principle. But what is happening in our lives is we are happily going against every principle. That means we are putting enormous pressure on our mind, which we don't realize. And that reflects in our life. So when I subject to this nature's principles, what is happening is my nature, my mind, my consciousness, everything is aligning with that principle. Aligning with the principle is a very natural process. Going against the principle is an enormous process. But without our knowledge, because that mind has so much capacity, it can go against the principle. And that going against the principle has become a very natural thing. Not a natural tendency. I won't say natural thing. And that is what reflecting in our lives. And that's why Babuji's, the key dictum is be in tune with nature. And not only he made statements, he gave us a very practical methods to apply that dictum. Be in tune with nature. So to be in tune with nature, the principles and the methods he has given as part of 10 maxims is so important and so vital for us to understand and implement. Implementing it is, as I said, is a very natural process. We don't have to to follow a natural process. There is no effort required. To go against the nature, there's enormous effort required. I'm repeating myself, but that's what we are doing. We have been doing always. So these 10 maxims are given to us. The way the nature is progressing from day to the night and night to the day. As it is progressing, there is a shift in the energy levels in the nature. If we mold our mind and our body and our consciousness in tune with it, what we can do, how we can progress our day is what this 10 maxims is all about. Okay. And simple, like all these methods like meditation, when to do meditation, when to do, cleaning, when to do prayer, how we intake our food, how we interact with this world. All these are covered as part of 10 maxims. So here, that's why, as I was saying, spirituality is an inclusive process. In spirituality, if you think of negating anything, you're going against the nature. Like Babaji was saying, we have no don'ts in heartfulness. In fact, earlier it is used to be called Sahaj Marg. Sahaj Marg means natural path. Just like I said just now, natural path means to be in tune with the nature. How the nature is, our minds are tuned. When a mind is tuned, then it can go into the depths of the secrets of this nature. And that's how all these findings happened. The higher states, higher spiritual states, so far which has not been expressed or experienced, and we are subjecting ourselves to that process. And we have talked, in our previous readings all the way up to central region, which are soul discoveries of Babaji with the help of his guide Guru Lalaji, right? And we are practicing this system. The more we subject our mind to this nature, the more we can adopt these 10 maxims. This approach to the highest becomes simpler and easier and natural. Okay. So let's start. I would request everybody to read this foreword on this. It's a wonderful foreword written by Dr. K.C. Vardachari. And he has his own books published. There's a Sahaj Mark or heartfulness as the seventh darshan. Seventh darshan means revelation. There are 6 darshans already in the scriptures, and he named this as a seventh darshan, means seventh revelation. So let's begin with 10 maxims directly. Let's see. All right. Okay. So maxim 1, rise before dawn and offer your prayer and meditation at a fixed hour, preferably completing them before sunrise. Have a separate place for meditation. As far as possible, develop the habit of sitting in one and simple on the same pose. Give special attention to purity of God and mind. This is the 10 maxim. So, first maxim, how we begin our day. Rise before dawn. So why? Because Babaji says, there is a transition from day to night, night into the noon, day into the noon, noon into the evening, evening to the night. So what is it called is this transition position is called Sandhya, where the two are coming together. And then the transition happens. So these transition moments are very potent moments because nature comes to certain balance. If we meditate in those times, those meditations can be more effective. Because what we call this biological cycle in medical terms, right? How is this biological cycle is happening? Because, as the day is progressing, the energy levels in the nature are changing. As the energy levels are changing in the nature, so the body also changing naturally according to those energy levels. That's why it's, if we mold our life with certain discipline, with certain attitude, then we can, behave according to this nature's energy. All right, let's begin. The fire of the divine, which has been burning since the beginning of time, has not yet cooled down. When the time of creation came, the latent thought came into action, and the subtlest particles got heated up. The subtlest particles got heated up. Thus, the preliminary covering set in the form the very first day. Even today's modern quantum science says the same thing. If you take this quantum conductors, I don't know if if you guys have read about it. When they're the passage of the current, the kind of becomes more efficient as it cools down. It becomes a perfect conductor. At the higher temperatures, because the heat raises, because the electrons are bombarding against the other atoms in the conductor, and thus it produces the heat, and that's how the current passing through that conductor is not efficient. Whereas if you take the same quantum conductor, these are the more effective conductors, semiconductors, what you call it. If you cool them down to below 0 degree temperatures, what happens is the electrons just pass through. It becomes the most effective conductor. So same things here, as as it is heated up, there is the latent motion has increased. As the motion has increased, the thought, started manifesting more and more and more. And, this thought produces certain heat. So vibrations. The subtler the vibrations in the body, in the mind, the subtler the whole system can become. Right? So now you can understand the opposite, how it happens. Thus, the preliminary covering set in the form the very first day. This covering, what he's talking about, this is something, very important to understand. And we'll talk more and more about it. But remember this statement. Thus, the preliminary covering set in form the very first day. So what happened is, we have this consciousness is trapped into these coverings. There are several coverings which happened. So a covering is a sheath. This sheath is known as a body, different bodies. That's why in the broader terms, we talk about the physical body, the subtle body, and the causal body, and things like that. Whenever you talk about a body, is a covering. What is this covering? Is covering basically the consciousness. Means in every covering, this consciousness is trapped. And we have lots of coverings. And how do we remove these coverings? Through the process of cleaning. This sentence is enough for us to talk for next 3 months. Okay. By the effort of continuous heating, the particles began to come into motion. Its intensity went on increasing, adding wheels after wheels to it. Wheel is again a covering, right? Grossness began to develop by the effect of growing intensity of the vibrations. So that means the subtlety of the mind, which is originally there, is lost. The action of every particle started and went on multiplying till the reality was completely wrapped up within, like a silkworm in the cocoon. So all these layers, wheels which are formed, basically wrap the whole consciousness. Here consciousness, Babuji is referring as reality. It's completely trapped. Now that's why, when we talk about the freedom, what is the freedom we are talking about? It's not the freedom of choice. It's the freedom of this consciousness. It's constrained in a smaller and smaller space. And because of that constrainment, we feel insecure. We feel we are not in the right place. And to find that right place, we are running around. Somebody wants to accumulate knowledge, all these possessions we are after. whether you call it knowledge, intellect, money, fame, all these things are emerging in our life. I mean, are destroying our life because this consciousness is wrapped and it doesn't know how to deal with it. So it is always in a state of, that unsatisfied state. It's always looking for that peace, satisfaction. And this is where the transmission comes to our aid to cool down that mind, to say, hey, this is what you need. Whatever you're looking for is not the real thing. The real thing is this divine essence, which has been already there in our whatever you call it, in our hearts. It's all pervading. It's already there in us. So once the consciousness comes in contact with this transmission, it becomes completely balanced. All these vibratory states almost become zero. Then you can imagine what kind of a state it brings to your body, mind, and consciousness. In other words, white shell of the egg remained open to view, while the reality within was lost to the sight. So correlationship began to spring up. Now one who was more closely attached to it received more of his share. The heat which existed on the first day manifested itself in man, and gradually it went on developing, assuming the form of organic growth. Every particle got affected, thereby absorbing its due share of it. So it's all about how the vibrations went on increasing, right? So as these vibrations have increased, what became is the whole manifestation. This mind started manifesting itself. So all the forms, physical life we see on this earth is a result of that manifestation. So each manifested differently. Some that became the ant, that became the bacteria, that became the boar, pig, buffalo, humans, according to its vibratory state. So this vibratory state is at the subtlest state, became the human being. Now human mind has recognized whatever that state it is in is not enough. It has to go to into this divine state, means more subtle state. And that is what we are trying here in the heartfulness. A material tinge was thus introduced into it, and it remained subject to influence of that which it was part of. The bigger layer previously formed by the heat maintained its connection with it. This is something we need to understand little deeper. The bigger layer previously formed by the heat maintained its connection with it, means look at it this way. Even though this most of all these layers are formed, the inner core layer, that connection is maintained with all other layers, thus influencing each other. So it's a feedback mechanism. So the vibratory state at the soul level is influencing the next layer and the next layer. And the vibrations we are creating on that outer layer is also going kind of trickling back to the soul. And thus it created a feedback mechanism. We always wonder why we are talking about all these points and things like that, right? So if I have to kind of draw a picture, See, because lack of what do you say, we cannot represent an n-dimensional picture here, so we kind of showing them as separate bodies, separated from each other, but they're not actually, it's an enclosure. So if I call this as the causal body, right, and this causal body has this soul within, this is the soul, and then what we have is the subtle body. A subtle body, and then we have this physical body. And here, through this, we are interacting with the world, right? This is the world. And we are creating, the mind has created certain feedback mechanism from the world. And this feedback, the vibratory state this is creating, is influences this subtle body. And this influences what is called the causal body. And soul cannot be influenced by anything. So it's the causal body becomes an interaction here, a layer here. And then it is sending the feedback accordingly. So the feedback comes is, if it is a lot of vibrations here, the same vibrations are felt in the mind. And then we say we are stressed, we are tensed, and we are out of balance. All these things are happening because of this. Now, through meditation, what we do is all these worldly vibrations are filtered and they become subtle. And through cleaning, we are making this feedback subtle. When these two become subtler and subtler, the same feedback comes from the soul. Now what happens is slowly these layers dissolve in the mind. When these layers start dissolving, imagine the whole stability. Soul is divine, or you can call that as the a reflection of the divine. What happens is that state becomes more prevalent in our life, more and more, right? So then what happens? This vibrations of the soul is what we observe. See, these vibrations of the soul is felt all throughout. And the worldly interactions also become part of it. So this, all that 10 maxims is doing is, if we tune ourselves, and this what becomes more prevalent in our life. So going back to the reading, now the influence caused on the greater thing will naturally be reflected on the smaller thing, which will get affected thereby in proportion magnitude. So that's what we discussed just now. So it's almost 8:28. So I'll stop here.